Welcome to this video on the Zenwara channel. My name is Shri Satguru Buddha Roa Bhagwan, and today we're going to talk about Chhinamasta, okay, the Mahavidya. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about Mahavidyas in our most recent videos on this channel, and I do invite you to listen to those videos to learn more about the Mahavidyas and how Zenwara teaches about the Mahavidyas. Okay, so the Mahavidyas are the great experiences, the great views. Okay, so how did I escape Chhinamasta? Okay, in the last video I talked about Chhinamasta, okay, basically the motherly embrace, the grip that doesn't let go, okay, suffocating love, okay, the experience of visiting her domain, right, the domain of the Mahavidya through yoga in body, right, and there being held, right, held essentially by the goddess to her breast, right, fed with her blood, and basically by the goddess. So what was the goddess? What did the goddess look like? You'll actually notice that if you look at the murti of Chhinamasta, different pictures that you can see online, okay, you're going to see the spurting blood, okay, feeding the head, feeding the attendants, okay. It's basically the god that feeds, right, the god that that feeds itself and feeds the others as well, right? So what you're looking at is you're looking at the queen form of Chhinamasta, okay? And if you look at her in her experience that you experience when you see her, Chhinamasta, okay, in her domain, in her throne room of her domain, where her attendants attend to her, she actually doesn't leave that throne room. She stays there pretty much all the time, right? Basically her attendants attend to her in that throne room, okay? And what happens is the experience of visiting that loka, or that experience, or that story, or that Mahavidya, that great wisdom, okay, that function and that storyline, personification of the functions of the system related to the goddess, which is the operating principle of creation, the operating system of the Kala Chakra, okay? As such, when you experience Chhinamasta, okay, you experience seeing her, seeing that queen, okay? And when you look at her, you could actually make a murti that would be more appropriate by making a very kind of obese and, obscene looking goddess in that way, okay, at that point there, okay, but a very powerful one. And that goddess there, what she does essentially is she holds you. She's very like, very fat essentially, okay, and she holds you and she brings you to her breast and she never lets go of you, okay. And then it's basically the domain, the dwelling, basically trying to retain you into it, not letting you escape now that you've entered into that domain, right? And she holds onto you and she feeds you from herself, her own blood, right? And then she feeds herself, and then she feeds her attendants as well who attend to her, and that's the cycle of it. And she just stays in the throne room, right, of her palace, and you stay there attached to her and not able to get out, not able to move, not able to escape. So this is a very traumatizing experience, as you can imagine. And all the Mahavidya experiences, they're tantric experiences, they're very, very, very intense, very fierce experiences, very intense experiences, and they're not for the faint of heart, okay? So before you can get to those levels, you have to develop a certain strength of heart, right? That'll help you to get through these things, through these challenges of these lokas, right? Of these experiences, okay? And why would you go to these lokas, right? To have that experience of that domain, right? And to clear that level, if you will, of that domain, clear that level of creation as a yogi, and basically take on those achievements that come with having cleared that achievement, that experience of the Mahavidya, that experience of creation, and having understood it, right? So I explain it now, the experience of the darshan, but you have to have understood it, right, and experienced it, and that knowledge creates your experience and your control over that experience. So how did I escape Chhinamasta? Well, actually, I was helped. I ended up in a situation when I visited that realm, that domain, which was difficult. Attached to Chhinamasta and not able to get out, and basically stuck to her, right? Retained in that way. Physically retained to that fat, obese being, right? Unable to escape, right, and fed our own blood. And the attendants would attend to her and bring her whatever she needed, right? So basically, how did I escape? Well, one of the attendants is not very nice at all, okay? And that attendant is a bit rough and a bit rude, okay? Not very compassionate at all. But one of the attendants, the other attendant that you see when you look at the Murti of Chhinamasta, that attendant has a heart, okay? Is basically has tenderness, okay? And basically helped me out by creating a distraction, by telling the goddess Chhinamasta, okay, after we got close, by telling the goddess that she was needed outside of the throne room, okay? So basically the goddess had to leave me in the throne room, and she told her attendant to watch me, right? And then she left the throne room to go deal with those, what was supposedly had to be dealt with outside of the throne room, okay? After a long period of time of being attached, right? And I took that moment to escape, because I was let escape by the attendant, right, to the goddess. And now the goddess knows that her attendant did that and all that, and the attendant unfortunately apparently was punished a little bit and all these different things, but everybody's all happy with each other. I talked to the goddess and to the attendant recently, and everyone's all okay and happy now. So and I said, please don't ever do that to me ever again. So basically, yeah, so how did I escape? I created that distraction. So it was through basically through intelligence, essentially, was how it was done, and through compassion of the heart as well, right? What was the way to basically escape that, right? So that was how I escaped Chhinamasta. So as I said, you know, for those yogis that do get to those advanced levels of yoga where you learn to travel to stories in body, okay, you know, think 2 times, maybe 3 times even, maybe even more than that, before visiting the domains of the Mahavidyas, because you're not welcome in that domain, okay, in that story, in that experience. So if you go to experience that, you know, you're going to enter a story, a domain, essentially through yoga by force in that way, if you want to see it that way, right? And in that sense, you know, that domain is going to seek to interact with you, right? And is going to seek to hold you, as the domains of the Mahavidyas seek to hold you so you don't escape with knowledge of that domain, okay? So it's important to understand these things. Now when we talk about, you know, we look at, for example, the current Murti that, for example, we'll talk about another Mahavidya, Dhumavati. We look at her Murti with the chariot and the crows and all that, and you wonder, well, how did someone get that? How was that Murti created initially, right? How was that Murti initially created with the knowledge of the smoke around Dhumavati and all these things, and the different Murtis? How were they created, and the different manifestations of them? How did it take place? And they were basically put into place, put into this society, into this world, by the great yogis and rishis, essentially, who basically traveled the stories and went to the realms of the Mahavidyas and gained the darshan and experience of the Mahavidyas and managed to get out, right? So that's how these stories were put into form, and basically how it became known, right? Once these truths, these stories, these 10 great wisdoms, right? Experiences, stories, right? Domains that govern creation were known, right? And one of the great accomplishments of a yogi is to have gotten darshan in body of all the 10 Mahavidyas and have gotten out of all of them, you know. So it's basically like check marks on your belt, right? You got all 10. And actually it's 9, but that's a different matter. So all this to say, that's how I escaped from Chhinamasta in that experience, okay? So I was helped, and I don't know that if I wasn't helped, if I would have been able to do it by myself. So even for a qualified yogi. So be careful, okay? Be careful when you enter into the realm of a Mahavidya, as you should be careful as you enter into any story, right? Everything's a story, everywhere. If you enter into a story, okay, and you're entering into a story where you haven't been invited, okay, be careful, okay, because you could have a rough reception. And we know that Tantra can be dark at times, right? So you might have a dark reception in those as well. Okay, so a little bit more about Chhinamasta, okay, and how I escaped Chhinamasta, okay. And if you feel that you're the type of yogi that can experience this loka, this realm, and escape on your own in your way, right, from that experience, right, that's that loka that seeks to hold you back, okay, if you, then maybe you can consider exploring the domains of the Mahavidyas. But until such that time, if you want to interact with the Mahavidyas, interact with them as a worshiper, you know, as someone who basically seeks to connect to their energy, right? Connect to the different functions that they represent and govern as stories and as beings, as facets of the goddess, okay? So that's different from entering the domain and visiting in body, okay? And that's an experience of yoga at higher levels, but it's also one that has its perils, you know? If you're gonna walk the heights, you can take a great fall. So be careful if you're going to advance to those advanced levels of yoga where you can actually travel to stories, okay? And basically, yeah. Thanks for listening to this video on the Zenward channel.